And joining us live in studio, Tsepo Khadima, political analyst. The Mosiri Tsiane is the spokesperson for the South African Liberty Foundation, rather is the chairperson for the South. And we have Zanele Luana, Deputy National Convener of Black First, Land First. To all three of you, you're most welcome. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. At home, the lines are always open to you as well. Let's just break it down in terms of what Mr. Pravin Gordhan would have been entitled to, especially when it comes to the criteria of him being an office bearer, and secondly that the fund was intended for Defence Force members and MK veterans.
Yeah, I think, first I would like to maybe go on record that I think it is a common cause that I don't think that Minister Gordhan is doing a good job as a Minister of Finance. And there are many reasons I can be able to sustain that argument and do so successfully. I'm not so sure that the economy is in good hands under his stewardship. But at the same time, I'm praying that this allegation is not true. Because if it is so, it will just completely destroy him as a person, and I think that will be most regrettable above all. We don't really, I think at this stage, have the full picture. But what has been brought to light is serious enough, I think, to cause all of us to not only ask questions, but to really demand that there be answers. We in a country whereby there are many, what I would term as deserving ex-combatants during the apartheid years, who are now destitute, who in fact live below they are below the poverty line. So to have one person having earned, still in office, 11 million rand, even if it was 1 million rand, that's certainly, I think, taking into account the thousands of others who right now are destitute and are disgruntled that they fought in the struggle for liberation of this country, and today they are destitute. It would leave definitely a bitter taste on the mouths of many. And as I say, I think personally I would just be, I would be disappointed. I think we can talk about him in other areas where I think he's not there, but in this case we hope so. However, there are many things that have not been answered. The Auditor General's report would not have been the right way to look at, and I think the Hawks investigators did not do a good job there. Because remember, auditing deals with a sampling. So they would not have necessarily looked at the cash book. If they had looked at the cash book, or if somebody had taken out the cash book, or the Hawks had been able to have access to the cash book, then certainly they would have been able to know who are the beneficiaries, who had been paid. And those that serve in public office need to bear this in mind. If you are not comfortable in being a nudist, don't serve in public office, because everything else has to be exposed. So nobody can claim confidentiality. If there were any monies that were paid with him being a member of the public service or as a public servant and as a politician, certainly that has to come out. So the question that needs to be answered, so many hours later, how come Minister Gordhan has still not come out to allay the fears or dispel the allegations? How
Correct.
can he maintain silence? And that is, I think that for me is exceedingly more worrying, that he's chosen to maintain silence.
Sorry, the disparities in terms of what the former DG, or rather the pension fund head, Marian Mbina Mthembu, had confirmed in a meeting last year that indeed a payment was made, but then refuses to depose or submit an affidavit to that effect. What do you make in terms of the allegations and the weight that it may or may not carry?
Well, it's a serious allegation. Ourselves, we rather worried that the persons that we were hoping that they would be there to protect the Constitution, our cradle of our humankind, in a Constitution that we consider as one of the best. You wouldn't want anybody, particularly a minister in those shoes, to have flaunted it. The allegations as they're very serious. But what also should come into the minds of every South African is that, are there people now going to go again and march and say that one minister is untouchable? One wonders. If these allegations tend to come out to be true with supportive either be affidavit or witnesses that come in the forth are South Africans again, or those that seem to say that this particular individual, he is the one that stands in front in opposition of corruption. Are they going to now stand up and say that we defend the minister, that the minister he's been targeted, that these allegations that are coming up are just smear campaign to tarnish his image? What are they going to do now? But we believe that everyone and none of us are above the law. That is what we've been saying at SALF, that everyone else should be investigated if there are serious allegations, particularly these ones of 11 million. It's a serious one. We can't ignore it.
All right, we'll come back to you, Zanele. Clyde Ramalaine, or Ramaile, as a Ramalaine, is a political... Yes, as a political analyst from the weekly expose. I'm sorry I butchered your name there. So why shouldn't these charges be seen again as unjustified scrutiny on Pravin Gordhan?
Well, good evening to you, Cindy, and to the ANN7 listeners and viewers. I think the fundamental point is that a payment has been made, as is claimed by the lady in question, in regard to the Minister of Finance. And so, therefore, if that payment has been confirmed in an interview that the Hawks had conducted with Mrs. Mtembu, then certainly that would be the starting point of the question. The second issue then is, if the payment was effected, the payment then should be affected by virtue of a certain condition, and the condition would be the act in that regard. So then the question becomes, does he comply, or does he qualify in terms of that? And so between those two things, a payment affected and him qualifying is the actual issue. Certainly in our society, it's easy to claim or even to be smeared. It's easy. We accept that. However, in this particular case, the fundamental thing that must be answered is, was a payment effected to the beneficiary, P. Gordhan in that sense? And secondly, did he qualify for the benefit? And thirdly, what was his position at the time, his position in society at the time of him receiving that benefit? Those are the fundamental things,
Is there room, sorry, Clyde, is there room for discretion, though, having gone through the act itself or the provisions of whether Pravin Gordhan was eligible to benefit from this pension fund?
I'm not necessarily a specialist to say whether there is room in that regard. I think if you look at the act as it stands there, it speaks to people that have been in the army or people that were fighting in the liberation struggle. So therefore, the question then would then mean, did he qualify in that sense? Did he go into exile as a soldier or MK veteran in that regard, MK soldier in that regard? And if he qualifies in that sense, then certainly it's accorded to him in that regard. If it did not, then it raises something else.
Yeah. Okay, just stay on the line, please, Clyde. I mean, we have I think it's section... or rather a subpoena that was sent based on Section 205 of the Criminal Procedures Act that really talks about where this pension fund was intended to go, and that is for one, people that were exiled, and secondly, for MK veterans and Defence Force staff. Just if you take that at face value, and Mr. Gordhan having benefited from the special fund, it doesn't seem that he was necessarily eligible. And if that's the case, what do you think should be done, or how should he be reacting to it?
So as the Black First, Land First movement, we are not alarmed about the reports that Pravin Gordhan is implicated on a corrupt activity where he seems to have benefited from a pension fund that is not supposed to go to him. Because if we look at his profile and his track record as serving as the current finance minister for South Africa, firstly, he has shares in banks that were implicated by the Competition Commission on corrupt activities and fixing the rand. And after those, that exposure that these banks were engaging in corrupt activities, as a shareholder in these big banks, to show some form of integrity, Pravin Gordhan did not withdraw his shares. In fact, he continues to enjoy his share from these banks, right? But also, Pravin Gordhan for example, as the Black First, Land First movement, we currently have a court case with the High Court to say the finance minister is compromised and conflicted and should resign. And we do hope that the president of the country will call on will release the finance minister with immediate effect, as we all know that this is an investigation that is on the table of the Hawks, and we do hope that the Hawks is going to speed up this investigation so that we have results quickly and Pravin Gordhan is declared conflicted and compromised. But we also do understand that, because remember there was an incident where Pravin Gordhan was summoned by the Hawks and he refused to appear in front of the Hawks because...
But we know those charges have been dropped, and it was really a messy situation. You know, you don't necessarily want to now institute another investigation that's essentially going to blow up in the Hawks' face. But I hate to interrupt your thought. I just want to get a reaction from Mr. Kebi Mapatswe. He's the NKMVA chairperson. Mr. Mapatswe, thanks so much for your time. Good evening. And have you engaged the national, or rather finance minister, on this matter previously, and what was his response?
Evening, and the viewers. We have never engaged the minister on this matter. But I think our people should put aside the Military Veterans Act 18 of 2011, because by then it did not apply. What was applying by then, it was the Special Pension Act that started in 1996. People were receiving their special pension, those who were in exile or those who served a period of 5 years full-time in political activities. But a lump sum of 11 million, I don't remember of any member who came from exile or any member of Umkhonto we receiving such an amount. And it's a really serious allegations about the minister. He's a former member from Umkhonto we. He's entitled to special pensions. But 11 million lump sum is really worrying.
Okay, so it's the amount that you're necessarily disputing, and not the fact that whether he was eligible or not to receive the special pension according to the Act.
He was eligible for a special pension as a former freedom fighter, because it was meant for people who participated in the struggle for band organization by then, and those who were members of Umkhonto we, Apla and Azanla, and those who were arrested. So he did qualify for that. But a lump sum of 11 million, I don't remember of any member receiving such an amount.
All right, Clyde, just your response in the eligibility of Mr. Gordhan for the pension fund, based on what the MKVA chairperson said.
Remember what we said. The two issues is the following: that a payment was effected as claimed by Ms. Mtembo, and the second issue, which is based upon that, which rather flows from that one, is the condition of that payment. If I hear correctly, and you know that if he was, as we said already, if he was eligible for it within the context of being an MK member in that regard, then certainly that would stand. Then the challenge, the issue then, all that's left to do then is to clarify that particular issue and say, well, being a member, he qualified, and this was the amount that all people qualified at the time. Concerning the amount in terms of 11 million, it then becomes difficult to justify what that amount would have been or should have been in that regard.
Yeah, but shouldn't you have had a right of reply from the minister before publication?
Well, certainly, Weekly Expose did approach the minister, and they have made attempts, as the article shows. And you know, they did approach the minister to get a response from him, and they were sent on to a cell phone number, which they had no reply, you know, later on.
Okay, so let's get to Botsang Muilwa, political analyst. Your response to this, Botsang, because it really seems as if it's something that could easily be explained by the finance minister, just based on what Mr. Kebi Mapatswe said.
Good evening, Cindy, to your panelists there and your guest. You know what is said about this thing is the Minister of Finance at all times avoiding to answer questions that may save the state embarrassment as the member of the cabinet, that may also, you know, put the nation at ease. So it is not helping us. However, I've heard what Minister Mapatswe had said. I would like to differ with him on one aspect. Firstly, these monies or these pensions were not intended for MK, as other analysts have said. They were intended for former liberation movement members. And KB Mapato had mentioned, Azanla had mentioned, APLA and MK. That's the first element. The second element is, at that time, from 1996 and onwards, before the Military Veterans Act, those monies were intended for people who were not political office bearers. In other words, you would have not been in a political position in government to benefit. That was the exclusion. And I'm seeing that everybody is avoiding to raise that matter. Let me make an example. I fortunately happen to have been a former member of APLA. And when I applied for the same thing in 1996 and reapplied in 1997, I was a senior official at the Department of Foreign Affairs, which is the record today. And my application was rejected because I was occupying a position in government as a public servant, and I did not qualify for that. However, there's something also worrying. We are talking about things that happened way back in the 90s, and it only comes to the public attention at the moment. Many who are supporting Pravin, they will say he is being politically, harassed and investigated and charged. But the time it takes for the public service, the government, to come with such allegations after almost 15 years of the act that has taken place, it is seriously questionable. The question of 11 million is, the way I read the Hawks documents, I've read the whole document, the investigation, the Hawks, as well as the payment documents. It does not say he received completely 11 million, but the 11 million was intended to benefit members of Umkhonto weSizwe, and he was seen as a person who was in the MK inside the country, who could use that money to benefit and fund the activities and the lives of Umkhonto weSizwe, former guerrillas. In my books, and I've argued with many ANC or former ANC members, that also there's another serious element. In my books, Pravin Gordhan was never a guerrilla. He may have belonged to the MK. There's many people who were never in exile, and these grants or pensions were not for everybody who was in exile. They were intended for military personnel, whether they were guerrillas or they became members of the South African National Defence Force after 1994. So it was not a general blanket pension that was given to everybody who was in exile and everybody who claimed to have belonged to a liberation military movement.
Yeah, just in terms of what the Hawks would have to do, and this time around treading very carefully to avoid blushes, is to ensure that they have the material witnesses, the two whistleblowers who've now gone AWOL, so to speak, and also to get the former, or rather DG in the office of the Eastern Cape Premier to depose in an affidavit that payment of this or whatever amount has been paid to Minister Pravin Gordhan. It's a very difficult one for them to get to, or rather to prove.
It shouldn't be at all. In fact, the pension fund in question, the former head of that pension fund, who is now DG in Eastern Cape, one can understand why she was reluctant to depose an affidavit in this regard, because the institution itself does have that record as to who was paid, and it would appear that they have provided some evidence as to who was paid. I just think that the Hawks went to the wrong place when they went or were directed by Mr. Fuzile to look at the Auditor General's report for a specific period. That itself, it should raise a question mark. Why are you looking at payment in one financial year and not in the period when the dossier that supposedly the whistleblowers brought to the attention of the Hawks speaks of a range of a period whereby this monies might have been paid over. So certainly I think it should not be a difficult thing for the Hawks to be able to get to the bottom of it. They should have access to all the information, but the only person who today can save the nation misery is none other than Minister Gordhan himself. As I say, that he has to be comfortable to be able to come and take the nation into his confidence as to what really happened, because this is very damaging. As I say, if you look at it, what Ms. Luana was saying, for example, there was only one case that was withdrawn against the minister. The case of the spy unit, that is still, or the rogue unit, that is still outstanding. The National Prosecuting Authority has not yet made a decision. Now we have this issue coming up. Over and above the many other issues that this minister is involved in, one has to ask a question. how is he able to do his job with all of these problems? And certainly, I think on the face of it, in my books, he's not doing a good job at all in terms of being the steward of this economy, and I'm not so sure how long we can keep him there. But on this matter, he's the only person who can help, and it's important that he comes out, and he comes out fast, like he did previously. Let him issue a statement and explain everything else so that his name can be protected, or at least we can know if there is something that has to be pursued further.
All right, Tsepo, we're going to leave it there. I'm afraid we're out of time. And thanks indeed for you coming in the studio. We had Clive Faramalain, who is a political analyst from Weekly Expose, and Mosiri Tsiane is from the South African Liberty Foundation, and Zanele Luana is the deputy convener of the Black First Land First, and Tsepo Khadima, political analyst, and Butsang Muyilwa as well. Thanks, guys, for coming in. We'll take a quick look at the weather, and we'll be back just after this.